That's a very that's a simple question with a very complicated answer, and I'll just kind of highlight it for you. In those days when they made the great films of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, they were done hand drawn on paper, hand painted, photocopied onto acetate, which is plastic, cells, put on a stack, which was the animation camera, the multi-plane camera, which was developed and designed and built at Disney by Disney for his movies, like Snow White. And the camera was placed way up high in this room, pointing straight down, and they would lay these acetate levels, which, again, the artwork had been photocopied, Xeroxed onto acetate, hand-painted on the acetate. That's why we have painted cells today. And they would be photographed one frame at a time. And that's how the movies were shot. Very complex. And it took forever because they didn't have very many multiplane cameras, and it took a long time to shoot every scene. The artwork had to all be prepared in order. They had to keep changing the artwork frame by frame by frame to make it all work. In these movies, we were now in the computer, meaning instead of the photocopying, the Xeroxing onto acetate, we were scanning it into the computer and assembling it, all those layers of artwork in the computer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. That bedroom argument scene I told you about from Snow White, I've seen the illustrations they used, and based on the fact that it takes a lot of paper to get the characters to move, I bet they had to go through thousands, if not millions, of sheets of paper.
There are literally millions of pieces of artwork for every movie in those days. They're keeping track of all that artwork was a big job. Every piece of paper had to be numbered to correspond to the scene, to the sequence, to the moment, to the character, to the level, to the shade, the shadow, the tone, the eyeliner, the eyelash, whatever it was. I mean, there are so many things that would be painted on top of one another. They had to be kept, they had to be tracked. And just doing that was an enormous job, because if they needed a reshoot, if something didn't work or they didn't like it or they wanted to edit it and they couldn't, they had to go back and do it again. You have to be able to put all those things back in order to reshoot it. So they had to have it organized.
Yeah, I bet it wasn't cheap.
No, but it wasn't cheap. However, they thought when they built the computer animation system at Disney back in these early days of the 90s for these films, they thought it was going to be cheaper, but it ended up being more expensive because it gave us more options.
Yeah.
It gave us more tools to tell our story.
Yeah, makes sense. Were you involved in the production of the Aladdin sequels at all, or no? Like Return to Jafar and the King of Thieves?
I wasn't, because at that time at Disney, we had Disney Feature Animation, where we were creating the first run movie releases. And then we had a separate group of people, entirely different, working on the direct-to-video releases.
Yeah, I really liked, when I first saw Aladdin, it was kind of the same thing as Beauty and the Beast. I didn't see it right away growing up because of the Disney Vault and the timing. It wasn't until around 2007 that I first saw Aladdin. But the direct-to-video films like Return to Jafar and The King of Thieves, I did see. Basically, I went to the store wanting Aladdin, but it wasn't out at the time, and so I instead got Return to Jafar and The King of Thieves, and they ironically became my favorite Disney movies for a period of time.
Well, there you go. That's a good thing. You met the characters through a different movie.
Yeah, and honestly, I was a little bit surprised to learn that they weren't released theatrically, but come to think of it, Return to Jafar I do understand, because it's only an hour long, and it's more of a television movie when you look at the animation than a feature movie. And so releasing Return to Jafar on video, that I can understand because it's more on par with the television, but Aladdin 3 was that was probably the closest, in my opinion, that Disney came to recapturing most of the magic of the first one. Just because Aladdin discovers his backstory, you know?
Yeah. Well, again, those direct-to-video movies at that time were created specifically to be selling videos, and we didn't want, because they were made in a much faster timeline with less resources. They didn't have the luxury that we had in feature animation with talent and time and money to make the movies. And so the studio didn't want to send a mixed message to you, the audience, to all of our audience, our fans. We didn't want to send a message saying that these movies are of the same level of quality, because they weren't. That's not to say they weren't great and well conceived and well constructed, well drawn, well painted. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that less time, less money, less resources, more time, more money, more resources. They didn't want you to compare them. So if it was direct to video, it already had a different purpose.
Okay. Now that makes sense, and that probably explains why Pocahontas 2 and a few others were, included a significant cast.
You can say it.
That's why I'm just trying to word it in a way that's respectful to the animators.
You don't have to. It's, we work in show business. It is business. And we need to make money for the companies that support us and to give us jobs. So the choices in those days by Michael Eisner and all the executives of the Walt Disney Company were to make more things. Make more amusement parks, make more hotels, make more books, make more products, more T-shirts, make more movies.
Yeah. And we did. That's great to hear. So yeah, you said it best. It's all about the business model. And honestly, Aladdin 3, what I liked about Aladdin 3 was Aladdin can kind of get closure, that he's not an orphan anymore. Like, that was a really good story. And I also found it funny that his adversary in the story, the leader of the 40 Thieves, he gets killed by his own greed, literally and figuratively, by holding the hand and then getting turned to gold. Like, that's fitting for a bad guy that's greedy.
You're right. Maybe it should happen to a few other people we know.
Who knows? Like, I do hope it would happen to one of those, crazy relatives that every family has.
I don't want to wish ill on any person, but only now, every once in a while, that thought crosses my mind.
Yeah, that crosses my mind as well, but I'm on par with you. I don't wish ill upon anyone for the most part.
No.